Now, let's talk about the 9S run. The whole idea of this route is that you're experiencing the same events from a different perspective. So, aside from the very beginning and the very end, the actual events of the route are identical to those played through in 2B's route. But since 9S is a support unit, he has the ability to hack into enemies to do a large amount of damage. Because he's hacking into machine lifeforms, he gets additional cutscenes that explain the enemy and plot backstory. Or he would, at least, if we weren't doing a pod-only challenge run. Since that is what we're doing, around 90% of this run is mechanically identical to the first route, and I'll be skipping over almost all of it. As far as the beginning goes, it's different from 2B's route, but it also contains exactly 0 melee combat sections, as it's all either done in a flight unit or with a turret section where you stand in place and shoot things with the pod, so it's also really not worth spending time on. Then everything is exactly the same up until the robot sea monster fight, where we get a different aerial combat section and then hop on a missile and launch ourselves directly into the monster's mouth. There's a neat scene of 9S rummaging around his own head, then we wake up just in time to see 2B skewering at him. 9S is sent back to the bunker for repairs, and we get to rummage around his head some more. We then hack into a series of robots and the abandoned factory itself to help out 2B while she's dealing with the murder cult robots. And of course, hack to help her out against the robot that officially killed the run. Back to 9S in the bunker, we chat with the commander for a pretty massive plot reveal. Turns out, the human race has been extinct for thousands of years, and the Council of Humanity is a lie, created by Yorha to maintain morale among the androids. Neat! Now let's go kill Eve. The fight goes the same until the second to last phase of the fight. I'd like to take a moment here to apologize to the family of the moose I rode to the fight, who got stuck in the arena and then died after being hit by somewhere between 1 and 1,000 missiles. Where 2B simply had to stay alive and wait, 9S, of course, has to do the actual hacking. After lots of hacking and even more anime yelling, the ending of the game plays out the same as it did in 2B's route. And so we have Ending B, and can start on the third and final full route of the game. The final route of the game starts off with 2B, 9S, and just about every other combat unit Yorha has, launching a full frontal assault to finally wipe out the machines. The assault goes poorly. Very poorly. Honestly, I don't think things could go worse. Oh, I also took control of A2 for the first time to have another point of failure. But I'm honestly hesitant to even count this because this fight is less of a fight and more of an interactive cutscenes. Enemies can't damage A2 and she kills them all in a single hit, but it does force me to use her sword, so make of that what you will. Now I'm given full control of A2 and can actually start playing the game again. For this route, I'll be playing all of A2's segments, then move on to 9S. So first things first, we head out into the desert and take out some of A2's Rage Against the Machines. Which quickly brings us to the first boss fight of the route. My tactic for this fight was to equip the missile launcher and pray. A2's taunt ability can be used in combat to increase the damage output of both yourself and the enemy, and her berserk mode gives you a damage buff but slowly drains your health. Because I'm so fragile to begin with, and am already pretty used to doing pathetic amounts of damage, I'll not be taking the risk of using these abilities. Especially since Route 3 doesn't have any autosaves. Like, I know it makes sense to not have autosaves from a lore perspective, since the bunker's blown up, but good god does that make some parts of this route infinitely more irritating. But I really don't have a whole lot to say about this fight. Most of it was just panic dodging away from the laser attacks that come blasting out of the sand, and chugging healing items until I eventually got through it. I imagine a better tactic would have been to just focus on the orbs one at a time to lessen the chaos of its attack phase quicker, but that's hindsight for you. A2 got sand in her filter, and now we need to go on a long fetch quest to get it fixed. In front of the resistance camp, Pascal's getting bullied by some machines. I save him, then make the decision to not murder him for no reason. Heading back to Pascal's village after a series of fetch quests, we find it on fire and under attack from some cannibal machines. It's very gruesome, and the flying worm machine is a massive pain in the ass to deal with because I have to blindly free aim while it's mostly out of view. After the village is cleared out, we meet up with Pascal, who's taken the children to safety in the factory. Well, maybe safety is the wrong word, because the machines almost immediately find them and start attacking again. It's slow going, but the hordes of enemies are slow enough that I can just run away and blast like 10 of them at a time with the laser pod. The Goliath tank has the same attacks as the one from the amusement park at the beginning of the game, but with shockingly little health in comparison to everything else I'm fighting. So much for pacifism, I guess. There's a brief scripted segment where we control Pascal, who's in turn controlling the arms fort. We do, unfortunately, have to bop the enemy arms fort that pops up, because our ranged attack is completely useless against it, failing the challenge yet again. With all the enemies dealt with, we go to check on the kiddos and oh no, that's actually genuinely upsetting. I decide to wipe Pascal's memory so that he'll become a merchant later, which is the last thing to do as A2, so it's on to 9S's section of the route. 9S's story here is all about actually investigating this crazy tower that popped up at the beginning of the route. The majority of his story here is getting through the 3 resource recovery units. They're towers that have you progress floor by floor until you destroy the core at the top. The first tower just throws waves of standard enemies at you. The second is a series of hacking minigames. At the top there's a mini-boss fight that I'm not going to spend time talking about because the moveset is literally just Adam's first phase, in the fight where 2B kills him. The final tower is more waves of standard enemies, but this time the lights are off. But at the top of this tower, instead of a simple core to destroy, there's a boss fight against 9S's corrupted operator. There are only 2 attacks in the first phase, rotating lasers and a fan of bullets. You just have to avoid getting hit while slowly whittling away at the glowing yellow orb rotating around the boss. Then she transitions into melee combat for the second phase, which is much easier than the first, because she doesn't have any moves to close the distance, so I can just run around the outside of the arena and shoot her till she dies. A perfect showcase of the absolutely riveting gameplay this challenge provides. Then in a cutscene, A2 shows up, 9S falls down a hole, and we're thrust into a fight against August, a machine who clearly just wants to give A2 a hug. This fight goes about the same as the operator's second phase. Running away from the boss is enough to put me outside its range for most attacks. He does spawn in some adds, but they're slow melee units, so with a little careful positioning, the laser pod can deal with them and the boss at the same time. With that little gauntlet done and dealt with, we can hop back into 9S's shoes and actually access the weird-ass tower that's been sitting in the middle of the map. Twin androids Devila and Popula show up to guard us while we hack into the tower. Or at least that's what they're supposed to do. What the hell, Devila? On take 2, they actually do the thing they're here to do, and we can see what's inside. Making our way through this weird-ass area is mostly just fighting pairs of corrupted Yorha units. The 2B clusterfuck of a mini-boss fight is pretty annoying. They're smart enough to flank me, so I'm forced to just chain dodges until I can get a few seconds of pod fire in, and repeat that until they're all dead. I absolutely did not have time for counterattacks or pod programs. Then we swap over to A2, who's also made her way into the tower, and oh god, not one of you again. We swap back to 9S before actually having to deal with the spider fucker, and these holographic twins send in more waves of enemies. The only thing of interest here is the new enemy types, Yorha flight units. Their laser attacks do heavy damage and have enough tracking to get you if you're not constantly running away, and the charge attack requires some truly funky timing to dodge through. One-on-one, they're not so bad, but as the fight progresses, you'll have to fight more and more at the same time. I mostly focused on dodging and only used counterattacks or pod programs when all flight units were using their Gatling rifle attack, which mostly go above 9S's head. The sword and rocket attacks also do significant damage, but are much easier to dodge. Now, we are unfortunately back to A2 and Koshi the Robo-Spider. Before the real spider boss fight can begin, we have to do this bit with the mysterious twins, but you literally win this fight by not attacking anything, so I'll just be moving on. Luckily, this spider never goes into its ball form, so we are fully capable of killing it. Unluckily, between our POV sporadically swapping between 9S and A2, and Koshi taking approximately 8 years to actually come up into attack range, this fight will take a solid 20 to 30 minutes. Which was especially frustrating because I killed 9S's spider in like a quarter of that time, but still had to play his section, making A2's fight take even longer. 9S's portion is just an aerial combat boss fight, so nothing to talk about there. All A2 has to do is not stand directly in front of her spider and jump over the well-telegraphed sweeping attacks. When Koshi fucks off like the obnoxious little shit he is, I found that just standing at the edge of the platform where he pops up kept me safe from all of the robot tentacles that popped up. Making this fight incredibly long and incredibly simple, which is almost worse than if it were actually hard. When I eventually whittle Koshi's health down far enough, it runs off and fuses with the spider 9S was fighting, and we go into the much quicker final phase of this fight. I used the missile pod for this fight for a couple reasons. Firstly, it has the most range of any of the pods, so I can stay far enough away from the boss to have enough time to react to its Rings of Infinite Damage attack, and stay out of range for most everything else. The second reason for the missile pod is that the longer the boss fight goes on, the more frequently the camera will swap between A2 and 9S. By the end of the fight, this is happening every couple of seconds, making trying to actually aim while still evading attacks considerably more difficult than usual. Now there's only one fight left in the game, the final confrontation between A2 and 9S. I choose to fight as A2 because I like doing things in alphabetical order, and also because this is by far the easier fight. 9S is designed to counter A2's hyper-aggressive, melee-oriented combat style, which is great because that's the exact opposite of what we're doing. He uses pod programs that don't even get close to hitting me, and isn't able to close the distance fast enough to be a real threat. He does try to hack A2, but with all of the loot and side questing I did during 9S's route, I've gotten more than enough practice at the hacking. So it's not a real issue. As is tradition by this point, the final fight of the route is the easiest, and 9S goes down in only a couple of minutes. Granting us ending S. Alrighty, now with the main story done, we've unlocked Chapter Select, making getting every other ending much easier. I'll start with the last two main endings. By going back to the final fight and selecting to play as 9S, we get a completely different fight. This one is essentially a beefed up version of our first fight against A2 way back in the Forest Kingdom. The main difference is that A2 now has a pod that she'll use to blast me from a distance, and the arena is much smaller. So much smaller that A2 sometimes gets herself stuck behind walls, allowing for a few seconds of free damage. Same tactics from the first fight against A2 apply. Focus on dodging her regular melee attacks, in addition to her new ranged attacks, and jump up and to the side whenever she goes off screen. And of course make liberal use of the laser pod program to knock her down and get lots of damage in. With A2 down, we go to the stars and get ending D. The final main ending is only accessible after doing the final fight as both 9S and A2. When you complete the fight as the second character, you'll get some dialogue prompts during the final credits. Answer no until you're asked if you want the androids to survive, then answer yes. You'll trigger a long-ass hacking section. You just have to survive until the end. After you've died a few times, and you will die a few times, you'll be asked if you want help. Selecting yes will make the minigame much, much easier. It goes from next to impossible to next to impossible to lose. As long as you're playing online, that is. Pretty sure you're just fucked if you're playing offline. Sorry. You'll eventually get to the end, where you're asked if you have anything to say to others. Do not answer in the affirmative. Say that you have nothing to say. If you don't, your save data will be deleted. You can always replay this if you want your character to show up to help others, but we're not even close to being done with this game. But that's the last of the main endings. The rest are short, goofy little things that you get for messing up quests, often intentionally.